He grew up in a small town where life moved slowly and everyone knew everyone else. The streets were dusty in summer and muddy in winter, but to him they felt safe, familiar, and full of memories. His family had always lived in the same house, on a piece of land that had been in their family for generations. The land was not very large, but it was fertile and meaningful. Every tree, every corner of the plot held stories of his childhood. He remembered running barefoot through the fields, playing hide and seek with his cousins, and sitting under the old oak tree with his parents while they shared their dreams and advice. From a young age, he was taught the values of hard work, honesty, and responsibility. His father often said, "This land is more than soil. It is our history, our future, and our pride." These words stayed with him. He spent hours helping his family in the fields, planting seeds, watering crops, and learning how to care for the land. Even as a child, he understood the weight of ownership and the importance of family trust. When he grew older, the world outside the town began to beckon. The news was filled with stories of people serving their country, protecting their nation, and standing for something greater than themselves. It inspired him. He knew joining the service would mean leaving behind the comfort of home, family, and the land he loved. But he felt a deep calling, a sense that he needed to contribute, to serve something bigger than himself. He could not ignore the feeling. The decision was not easy. His mother cried when he shared his plans, and his father gave him a firm but silent nod. Friends tried to dissuade him, warning him about the dangers, the uncertainty, and the loneliness. But he had made up his mind. He wanted to leave a mark, to prove to himself and the world that he could rise above ordinary life. Before leaving, he made arrangements for his land. He trusted his relatives, people he had known all his life, to take care of it. He believed that family loyalty was strong, unbreakable, and that no harm could come to what he held dear. Packing his belongings was a slow and emotional process. Each item he touched reminded him of home, the worn-out shoes he had played in as a boy, the small notebook where he wrote his dreams, and the photograph of his family that always made him smile. He hugged his mother tightly, feeling the warmth and love that he feared he might miss in the days ahead. His father clasped his shoulder, silently conveying both pride and worry. On the day he left, the whole town seemed to gather near the station. People waved, some cheering, others with tears in their eyes. Children ran alongside, mimicking his salute, while elders watched solemnly, knowing the dangers he might face. He walked with a mixture of pride and apprehension, his mind racing with thoughts about the future, the service, and the family he left behind. The journey was long, and as the train pulled away, he pressed his hand against the window, trying to memorize the sight of his home, the fields, and the faces he loved. The early days of service were harder than he imagined. The routines were strict, the work exhausting, and the environment completely unfamiliar. He had to adjust quickly, learn new skills, follow orders, and endure physical and mental challenges that tested his limits. Nights were long and cold, and he often lay awake thinking about home, the land, and the people he loved. Every letter he received from his family was cherished, read and reread until the paper was soft and worn. Those letters became his anchor, reminding him why he had chosen this path. Despite the hardship, he found moments of beauty and connection. He met people from different towns, backgrounds, and walks of life. Each person had a story, a dream, and a reason for serving. They shared laughter, meals, and fears, forming bonds that felt like a new kind of family. He realized that service was not just about duty. It was about learning patience, resilience, and the strength of the human spirit in quiet moments. He would think about the land he left behind. He pictured the fields in different seasons, the fresh green shoots in spring, the golden harvest in summer, the quiet snow covering the ground in winter. He imagined walking barefoot through the soil, feeling it crumble softly under his feet, and seeing the crops flourish under his care. These thoughts gave him hope and comfort, a reminder of what he was fighting to protect in a broader sense, not just his home, but the ideals of trust, integrity, and family. He began to notice changes in himself. The discipline instilled by service shaped his character. He became more patient, more observant, and more determined. He learned to face discomfort without complaint and to see opportunities where others saw obstacles. Even small victories, a successful mission, a compliment from a superior, a moment of camaraderie, felt monumental. They reminded him that perseverance was a skill. Every day he was growing stronger in ways he had never imagined. As months passed, the distance from home grew heavier. He missed the simple routines, the smell of fresh soil, the sound of birds at dawn, the laughter of his siblings. He longed to walk the familiar paths, touch the old oak tree, and hear his father's advice once more. The letters from relatives, however, began to feel different. They became infrequent, brief, and sometimes oddly vague. He brushed it off, attributing it to the busyness of life and his own distractions. Yet a small unease began to creep in, a feeling that something might not be right. Despite the worry, he focused on his responsibilities. Service demanded attention, and he immersed himself in learning, training, and helping others. He found solace in routine and purpose, but at night, when the world was quiet, he would close his eyes and imagine the land he had left behind, hoping that it was safe, just as he had trusted his family to ensure. Those moments were bittersweet, filled with love, longing, and an unspoken fear. During one rare leave, he spoke to an old friend back home over the phone. The conversation was brief, and while everything seemed normal on the surface, he sensed hesitation in the friend's voice. He dismissed it as nerves or background noise. He returned to duty with a smile, reassuring himself that family ties were strong and that everything he had left in their care was safe. He continued to serve. Earning respect from his peers and superiors alike, he became known for his dedication, humility, and willingness to help anyone in need. Despite the physical exhaustion and emotional strain, he found meaning in every task, knowing that he was contributing to something larger than himself. Yet deep down, a small knot of worry about the land lingered, a silent reminder that some battles could not be fought with discipline alone. He would often close his eyes and imagine returning home, walking through the familiar paths, feeling the earth beneath his feet, and seeing the golden fields sway in the wind. He imagined the joy of sharing stories with his family, of laughter and celebration, of the quiet satisfaction of a hard day's work in his own land. Those dreams gave him strength to push forward, to endure, and to remain hopeful. Even when the world around him was harsh and unpredictable, he knew that one day he would return. He carried that promise in his heart, a quiet but unwavering determination that no matter how long it took, he would come back to the land, to the family, and to the life he loved. Each day of service was a step toward that return, a test of patience, courage, and faith. He did not yet know the trials that awaited him upon his return, but he felt ready, trusting that the values instilled in him and the lessons learned in service would guide him through anything that came next. While he continued his service, life at home was quietly shifting in ways he could not imagine. At first, the relatives he had trusted seemed to be keeping things in order. Letters from them arrived regularly, filled with routine updates about the weather, harvest, and small matters around the house. He felt a sense of relief, believing his land was in good hands and his family's legacy was safe. Each envelope he opened strengthened the bond he had with his home, even from miles away. But as months passed, he began to notice subtle changes in the letters. The tone shifted, becoming shorter and less detailed. Mentions of the land were fewer, and some updates felt rehearsed or strange, as if they were avoiding certain topics. At first, he dismissed these thoughts, telling himself that his relatives were just busy or tired. He focused on his duties, on learning new skills, and on staying alert, all the while trying not to let suspicion creep into his mind. Still, a small seed of unease began to grow. During a rare break, he spoke with a neighbor who had always been close to the family. The neighbor hesitated when asked about the land. At first, he spoke carefully, saying everything seemed fine. But under gentle questioning, the neighbor's answers became less certain, and a flicker of doubt began to appear. He could not understand it fully, but something felt wrong. His heart sank as he thought of the land, the fields, and the home he had left behind with such trust. Meanwhile, the relatives who were supposed to protect his interests began making decisions without his knowledge. They met with strangers, signed papers, and discussed plans that were hidden from him. The man at home, unaware that the land was being sold, assumed everything was routine. He believed family loyalty was stronger than money or greed, and that honesty was a bond that could never be broken. He could not imagine betrayal from those he had trusted most. As time went on, letters became scarcer. When they arrived, they were impersonal and brief, often leaving him with more questions than answers. He found himself reading between the lines, searching for clues, but everything seemed normal. He told himself that he was imagining things, that distance could distort perception. But inside, a growing worry persisted, gnawing at him quietly. Like a shadow lurking at the edge of his thoughts, he tried to distract himself by focusing on the tasks at hand. Service was demanding, and each day brought new challenges that required his attention. Training exercises tested his strength and endurance. Missions demanded focus and strategy, and the camaraderie of his fellow soldiers provided comfort and support. He learned to face fear calmly, to trust his instincts, and to act decisively. Yet no matter how busy or occupied he became, the thought of home and the strange distance in correspondence lingered in his mind. One day, during a quiet moment, he spoke to a fellow soldier about family responsibilities and trust. The conversation was light at first, a simple exchange about life outside of service. But as they spoke, he realized that he could not fully share the unease he felt. The fear of betrayal from relatives was a heavy burden, one that weighed more than physical exhaustion. He kept it to himself, resolving to remain strong and to wait until he could see the truth with his own eyes. Back at home, relatives were making arrangements that would change everything. They approached buyers who were eager to acquire the land, emphasizing speed and secrecy. The paperwork was manipulated, signatures forged, and explanations provided to outsiders that made the sale appear legal. What had been a simple, honest property passed from one hand to another under false pretenses. The man serving his country had no way of knowing that each letter he trusted was a piece of a carefully crafted deception. The community around him was unaware of the betrayal at first. Friends and neighbors continued their routines, unknowingly facilitating the relatives' actions by treating them as normal. The man at home seemed calm, polite, and helpful, which gave an impression that everything was under control. To an outsider, nothing appeared out of place. The betrayal was silent, invisible, and perfectly timed to coincide with his absence, making it almost impossible to suspect. Meanwhile, he continued his daily routine with a mixture of pride and anxiety. He excelled in his work, gained recognition for his dedication, and earned the respect of those around him. But the thought of the land and the strange silence of his relatives never left his mind. He would find moments in the day to write letters, asking questions in a casual, almost joking tone, trying to mask the worry in his heart. Each reply, no matter how brief, was analyzed for meaning, tone, and hidden messages. As months became years, the distance from home began to weigh heavily on him. He realized that he had left behind not just a piece of land, but a part of his identity, his history, and his pride. The man who once ran through the fields barefoot, who once knew every corner of the land intimately, now felt a sense of helplessness. The idea that someone could betray him, to take what he had grown up with, seemed impossible, and yet increasingly likely. He made attempts to contact relatives more directly, but responses were evasive. Promises were made that things would be fine, that nothing had changed, and that the land was being cared for as it always had been. He wanted to believe them, wanted to cling to the hope that family bonds were unbreakable. But each vague response, each careful phrasing, only increased the suspicion that something was amiss. The unease became a constant companion, whispering doubts in moments of quiet. During a particularly stressful period, he tried to focus on achievements in his service. He reminded himself that every challenge he faced, every obstacle he overcame, was preparation for the day he would return home. Yet even in triumph there was a shadow. Success in service could not fill the growing gap in his heart caused by the uncertainty at home. He longed for confirmation, for proof, for a clear message that his land, his family, and his memories were safe. One evening, After completing a long day of training and work, he sat quietly under the night sky. The stars shone brightly, and the cool wind carried a sense of calm. But in his heart, a storm brewed. He thought of the oak tree, the fields, the small house, and the family who had promised to protect it. He wondered if loyalty could really be measured, if trust could withstand distance and time, and if the people he loved most could act against him without remorse. He remembered conversations with elders before leaving, words of advice about patience, integrity, and faith in others. He clung to these lessons, hoping that patience would be rewarded and that truth would prevail. Yet he could not shake the feeling that something was happening behind the scenes, something he could not control or influence from afar. The weight of this realization pressed on him, lending sorrow with determination. Despite the growing anxiety, he continued to perform his duties with excellence. Each day brought small victories, moments of pride, instances of camaraderie that reminded him of human kindness and resilience. He learned to compartmentalize, balancing the fear of what might be happening at home with the demands of service. But the fear lingered, subtle yet persistent, shaping his thoughts and actions. A quiet tension underlining every success. Letters arrived less frequently now, and each one was scrutinized carefully. Words were read multiple times, sentences analyzed for hidden meaning, and intentions questioned. The absence of detail about the land and property, once taken for granted, now stood out sharply. He began to understand that what he had assumed was safe and protected might in fact be at risk. The realization hit him slowly, painfully, like the first drops of rain before a storm. He resolved to stay strong, to finish his service with honor, and to return home prepared for whatever awaited him. The sense of duty, pride, and personal growth that had inspired him to join in the first place became intertwined with a new determination. To confront the uncertainty at home and reclaim what was rightfully his, the seed of doubt had grown into a clear understanding that the battle at home might be even more challenging than any mission or obstacle he faced in service. As the days passed, he continued to serve with diligence, but his mind often wandered to home. He imagined the fields in every season, the familiar sense of the soil, the laughter of family members, and the comfort of returning to a place he had always loved. These mental images gave him both solace and strength, a reminder of what he was fighting for beyond duty and honor. He held on to hope, knowing that one day he would see the truth for himself and confront the changes that had taken place in his absence. The day he returned home was filled with anticipation, excitement, and a nervous tension that he could not shake. After months of service, leaving behind the routines, responsibilities, and camaraderie of his military life, he finally stepped off the transport and breathed in the familiar air of his hometown. The streets, the smell of the fields, the distant hills, they were all the same, yet subtly changed, like a memory slightly blurred by time. He carried a mixture of pride, hope, and longing, imagining the reunion with his family and the comforting sight of his land as he walked toward his home. He expected smiles, laughter, and the warmth of family. He imagined stepping onto the familiar soil, running his hands over the fences, and seeing the trees that had grown under his care before he left. But the moment he approached, he sensed something was off. There was a tension in the air, subtle and difficult to place. The house seemed quiet in a way that felt unnatural, and the expressions on the faces of those he had trusted most were guarded, almost rehearsed. He called out, expecting to hear laughter or familiar greetings, but the responses were muted. Relatives he had depended on for the care of his land seemed distant, avoiding eye contact and speaking with careful phrasing. He could not understand it at first, thinking perhaps he had misjudged their behavior. But a growing knot of unease settled in his stomach, and instinctively, he turned his attention to the land that had always been a source of pride and comfort. What he saw made his heart stop. The fields he had imagined walking through, the familiar trees and fences, were now obscured by new structures and unfamiliar markings. Strangers moved with ease over his property, tending to crops he had never planted and making decisions he had never approved. It was a scene he could not have imagined, one that seemed to twist time and memory into a cruel joke. He stood frozen, trying to process the shock, the betrayal, and the sudden reality of loss. He approached one of the strangers, seeking explanation, but the answers were cold and detached. The land had been sold, he was told, and all decisions had been made legally in the eyes of the law. Confusion and disbelief washed over him. Legal documents, signatures, and official approvals, words that had always represented fairness and justice, now felt like weapons used to deny him his heritage. He felt a deep sense of helplessness, realizing that the system he had trusted could be manipulated against him. Turning to the relatives he had trusted, he looked for honesty, for a spark of recognition that something was wrong. But their eyes avoided his, their words careful and rehearsed. Denial was immediate and firm. Questions were deflected, explanations vague. The betrayal was complete, and the foundation of trust he had taken for granted crumbled in an instant. He felt as though the ground beneath him had shifted. The life he had imagined returning to had vanished overnight. Anger surged, followed quickly by sorrow. He thought of the sacrifices he had made, the years of service, the dedication, and the hope he had carried in his heart. All of it seemed trivial in the face of this sudden and unexpected betrayal. He remembered the letters, the assurances, and the trust he had placed in family, and the weight of it all pressed heavily on his chest. Tears threatened to fall, but he fought to remain composed, understanding that the journey to reclaim what was his would require strength, patience, and determination. In the days that followed, he tried to navigate the legal and social complexities that now confronted him. Friends who had known him all his life offered sympathy but limited guidance. Neighbors seemed uncomfortable, unsure whether to take sides or speak out. The relatives who had orchestrated the sale maintained their distance, confident that the man's absence had ensured their actions would go unchallenged. He realized that reclaiming his land would not be a matter of confrontation alone, but a battle requiring careful planning, evidence, and unwavering perseverance. He spent hours revisiting every memory, every document, every interaction he had left behind. Old deeds, letters, photographs, and receipts became critical pieces of a puzzle he had not anticipated needing to solve. Each item was handled with reverence, with the understanding that these fragments of the past were keys to reclaiming the life and legacy that had been taken from him. His determination strengthened with every passing day, quiet but unyielding flame amid the storm of betrayal. The emotional toll was immense. Sleep was difficult, meals were often skipped, and moments of despair threatened to overwhelm him. Yet, he reminded himself of the values instilled during service discipline, patience, and strategic thinking. He understood that emotional reactions alone could not restore what was lost. He needed clarity, proof, and a plan. Slowly, methodically, he began to chart a path forward, aware that the journey ahead tests not only his resolve, but the depth of his character. Conversations with elders and community leaders became critical. He sought advice from people he knew to be wise, impartial, and trustworthy. They listened, offered guidance, and helped him understand the legal processes he would need to navigate. Each step was deliberate, and he learned the importance of patience, documentation, and careful communication. Every interaction reinforced the reality that reclaiming the land would be a long and challenging process. But it was not impossible. He also spent time reflecting on the relationships that had been broken. The relatives who betrayed him were no longer simply family. They had become obstacles, reminders that trust could be violated. Yet he resisted bitterness, understanding that anger alone would not achieve justice. He channeled his emotions into focus, strategy, and meticulous planning, determined to restore what was his with integrity and perseverance. As he prepared for the legal and personal battles ahead, he also began thinking about the future beyond reclamation. He envisioned how he could not only regain the land, but also transform it into something meaningful, a place that reflected his hard work, dedication, and vision. He imagined community gardens, productive fields, and spaces that could support and inspire others. This vision became a source of motivation, reminding him that the struggle was not just about the past, but also about creating a future worth fighting for. The days blended into weeks, and he maintained a balance between action and patience. Every phone call, every meeting, and every review of documents was approached with careful thought. He remained vigilant, watching for inconsistencies and uncovering evidence that would support his claim. Slowly, the fog of confusion began to lift as he pieced together the actions taken in his absence and identified the legal and moral avenues to reclaim his rightful property. He also drew strength from memories of service and the lessons learned during his time away. Endurance, resilience, and strategic thinking became tools in his personal battle. The challenges he had faced in unfamiliar terrains under pressure and in moments of uncertainty prepared him for this unexpected confrontation at home. He realized that the journey of service had not only shaped him into a capable individual, but it also equipped him with the mindset necessary to navigate betrayal and injustice. Amid the challenges, small victories provided encouragement. A supportive community member offered insights into missing documents. A neighbor recalled critical details about the sale, and old friends provided emotional support. Each piece of assistance, though minor, became part of a mosaic that strengthened his resolve. He understood that perseverance, combined with careful planning and support, could gradually restore what had been taken. Despite the weight of betrayal, he refused to let despair dominate. He focused on maintaining his integrity, approaching every interaction with clarity and composure. The temptation to react impulsively was present, but he reminded himself that long-term success depended on strategy and patience. This self-discipline became a defining aspect of his journey, guiding him through moments of doubt, fear, and emotional turbulence every morning. He walked the borders of his property, now partially occupied by strangers, and visualized the land restored to its rightful state. He imagined the crops flourishing, the fences mended, and the house alive with laughter and life. These moments of visualization strengthened his determination, reminding him of why the fight mattered and what he stood to reclaim, not just the physical land, but the legacy memories, and the sense of identity tied to it. Conversations with legal advisors and community elders continued to shape his strategy. He learned about the necessary procedures, documents, and steps required to challenge the sale. The path was complex, filled with potential obstacles, but he approached it methodically, applying the same discipline and focus he had cultivated during his service. He understood that patience, accuracy, and persistence were critical to success, and he committed fully to the process. As the weeks passed, the initial shock and disbelief transformed into determination. He knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but he also recognized that every step, every document, every carefully considered action brought him closer to justice. The betrayal he had experienced fueled his resolve, reminding him that nothing worthwhile was ever easily attained. His focus sharpened, his plans crystallized, and his vision of restoring the land and securing his family's legacy became a guiding force, propelling him forward despite the challenges that loomed on the horizon. The fight to reclaim his land was longer and harder than he had imagined. Every day brought new challenges, both legal and emotional. He spent hours reviewing old documents, searching for proof, and speaking to officials who could provide guidance. Each meeting required patience, careful wording, and the courage to stand firm, even when it felt like no one believed him. The process tested his limits, but he refused to give up. The land was more than soil and crops. It was his heritage, his memories, and the trust he had once placed in his family. Friends and neighbors watched silently, some offering advice, others warning him to let it go. Many did not understand the depth of the betrayal or the importance of the land, but he knew that giving up was not an option. Every step backward reminded him of the sacrifices he had made while serving, the years spent away, and the trust he had placed in those who had now deceived him. He drew strength from these memories, letting them fuel his determination rather than consume him with anger. The relatives who had sold the land tried to maintain their story, but cracks began to appear. Small inconsistencies, careless statements, and forgotten details provided him with the openings he needed. He learned to listen carefully, to watch for hesitation, and to gather every piece of evidence. Each discovery, no matter how minor, was a victory. He documented everything, creating a detailed record of actions, dates, and statements that would support his claim. Late nights were filled with research and planning. He studied local laws, sought advice from those with experience in disputes, and learned the procedures that would allow him to challenge the sale. The complexity was daunting. He often felt overwhelmed, wondering if the battle was too great. But he reminded himself that patience and perseverance had always been his allies. One step at a time, one document at a time, he moved closer to justice. During this period, he also began to repair relationships with neighbors and friends who had remained loyal. They provided emotional support, offered information that he could not access alone, and encouraged him when despair threatened to overtake determination. Their presence reminded him that community could be a source of strength, that alliances and trust could be rebuilt even after betrayal. He leaned on them, learning the importance of asking for help without shame or hesitation. Every interaction with the relatives who had betrayed him became a careful negotiation. Words were chosen with precision, questions were phrased strategically, and actions were deliberate. He discovered that the more calm and composed he remained, the more likely the truth would emerge. Anger and confrontation could cloud judgment, but patience, focus, and evidence created results. Slowly, he began to see patterns in their behavior, uncovering details that revealed the full extent of the deception. Some days were filled with small victories that lifted his spirits. A neighbor remembered a key conversation. A document was discovered that had been misplaced. A local official offered advice that clarified a confusing legal procedure. Each piece of progress strengthened his resolve, proving that persistence and careful planning could overcome even the most difficult obstacles. The journey was exhausting, but it also brought a sense of empowerment and clarity. He also took time to reflect on the lessons he had learned during service. Discipline, focus, and strategic thinking were skills that translated into his personal battle. He applied these lessons to every meeting, every document review, and every negotiation. The patience he had cultivated during long hours of training and service became invaluable, allowing him to remain steady and composed when others doubted or resisted. He realized that the journey home was not just about reclaiming land, but about demonstrating the strength of character that had been honed through years of challenge. Family ties, once taken for granted, were now complicated and fragile. He understood that forgiveness and understanding could coexist with justice. The relatives who had betrayed him were no longer simply family. They were part of a larger story that included accountability and responsibility. He resolved to act with integrity, to pursue justice without malice, and to restore what had been lost in a way that honored both his heritage and his values. The emotional toll was significant. There were moments of doubt, fear, and despair. Nights were long and sleepless, filled with questions about fairness, loyalty, and the strength of human character. But he found comfort in the vision of restoration, imagining the land returned to its rightful state, the fields thriving, and the house alive with life once more. This vision became a guiding force, a reminder of why the struggle mattered and what he stood to reclaim. Legal proceedings were slow and meticulous. Every step required evidence, testimony, and careful presentation. He learned to navigate bureaucracies, to anticipate obstacles, and to persist even when progress seemed minimal. The journey demanded both mental and emotional resilience. Each delay was a test, each setback an opportunity to grow stronger. He reminded himself that persistence was the key to overcoming challenges that seemed insurmountable. During this time, he also focused on personal growth. He read, learned, and sought wisdom from those who had faced similar struggles. He strengthened his relationships with those who supported him, building a network of allies who could provide guidance, encouragement, and practical assistance. He realized that reclaiming his land was not only about legal action, but about community, trust, and the collective effort of those who believed in justice. As weeks turned into months, progress became visible. Evidence accumulated, witnesses were identified, and the legal framework for reclaiming the land began to solidify. Each milestone, no matter how small, was celebrated as a victory. The journey was still long, but momentum was building. He could see the possibility of success, a tangible reminder that perseverance and careful planning could overcome even the most difficult challenges. He also learned the importance of emotional resilience. Anger, frustration, and sadness were natural, but they could not dictate actions. He practiced patience, mindfulness, and reflection, understanding that clarity of mind was essential for navigating the complex path ahead. Each decision was made with care, each action measured against both immediate needs and long-term goals. The emotional discipline he cultivated became a foundation for the practical steps required to reclaim what was rightfully his. Community support continued to play a crucial role. Friends, neighbors, and local officials who understood the situation provided insight, assistance, and encouragement. Their involvement reminded him that while the betrayal had been personal, the struggle was also a shared endeavor. The support of those who believed in fairness and justice reinforced his determination and provided a sense of solidarity that was invaluable during difficult times. He maintained a vision of the land restored, imagining the fields flourishing, the fences repaired, and the house filled with life. This vision guided every action, providing a source of motivation and hope. He understood that the journey was not simply about reclaiming property, but about restoring a sense of identity, dignity, and purpose. The land represented more than ownership. It was a symbol of perseverance, integrity, and the human spirit. By the end of this stage, he had become more than someone seeking justice. He had become a strategist, a planner, and a resilient individual capable of facing adversity with calm and determination. The lessons learned during service, combined with the skills honed through careful observation and action, had prepared him for the final steps of the journey. The path was still challenging, but he was ready to continue. Armed with knowledge, determination, and the unwavering belief that justice could be achieved. After months of planning, research, and relentless pursuit of justice, the moment finally came when he could begin to see the fruits of his efforts. The legal battle, though grueling and emotionally draining, had started to turn in his favor. Evidence meticulously collected over time-old deeds, letters, witness statements, and proof of the forged transactions began to make a clear case. He presented everything with careful precision, showing not only the betrayal but the deliberate actions that had taken place in his absence. Every detail mattered. Every piece of information strengthened his claim. The relatives who had betrayed him could no longer hide behind vague explanations and rehearsed stories. Under scrutiny, their inconsistencies became clear, and their actions were exposed for what they truly were. The legal process, slow but steady, allowed truth to emerge. Officials and community members alike began to recognize the injustice that had occurred. It was a hard-fought victory, not just for him, but for fairness and integrity. The journey had tested his patience, resilience, and character. But now, justice was within reach. When the court finally ruled in his favor, the relief was immense. The land, which had been taken from him through deceit, was returned to his care. Walking onto the property, seeing the familiar fields and trees once again, filled a wave of emotion, pride, joy, and a deep sense of accomplishment. It was more than a legal victory. It was a restoration of trust, identity, and dignity. The struggle had been long, but it had proven the value of perseverance and integrity. He did not celebrate alone. Friends, neighbors, and those who had supported him throughout the process joined in his triumph. Their encouragement, advice, and unwavering belief had been instrumental in achieving this outcome. Together, they witnessed the restoration of the land, and the sense of community that had helped him persevere became a source of shared pride. The journey had shown him the power of unity, honesty, and steadfast determination. With the land restored, he turned his attention to the future. He wanted to make the property not just a symbol of what had been taken and regained, but a place of purpose and meaning. He began planning projects that could benefit the community, planting crops that could sustain local families, creating spaces for learning and gathering, and ensuring that the land would be cared for with the dedication and respect it deserved. Every action was infused with a sense of responsibility, reflecting the lessons learned from betrayal, service, In the fight for justice, the relatives who had betrayed him faced the consequences of their actions, both legally and socially. Their deception, once hidden, had been revealed, and the community's awareness brought accountability. While the process was not about revenge, it demonstrated the importance of truth and integrity. The experience reinforced his belief that actions have consequences and that dishonesty cannot withstand persistence, evidence, and moral clarity. As the land flourished under his care, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The years of service, the sacrifices, the longing for home, and the pain of betrayal had shaped him into someone stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Each challenge had been a lesson, each setback a test of character. And now, with the land restored, he understood the deeper meaning of perseverance, trust, and the human spirit's capacity to overcome adversity. He also reached out to others who had supported him, ensuring that their contributions were recognized and valued. The journey had not been solitary. It had been a collective effort highlighting the importance of community and collaboration. Through this, he fostered stronger bonds with those around him, creating a network of trust, respect, and mutual support that would endure beyond the immediate victory. The land, once a source of worry and betrayal, became a symbol of resilience and hope. Children played among the fields, families gathered for celebrations, and the sense of life and continuity returned. Each day, he tended to the soil, repaired fences, and nurtured crops with dedication and love. The property became more than a legal victory. It was a living testament to patience, hard work, and the ability to overcome obstacles that once seemed insurmountable. He often reflected on the lessons he learned, the importance of vigilance, the value of patience, the strength found in community, and the necessity of integrity. These lessons shaped not only his actions regarding the land, but his approach to life. He became a source of inspiration to others who faced challenges, demonstrating through example that perseverance, honesty, and careful strategy can reclaim what is lost and create something lasting and meaningful. The journey also deepened his appreciation for service, family, and home. While the betrayal had caused pain, it had also revealed the true nature of relationships, power of loyalty, and the value of enduring commitment. He understood that trust is precious, that actions have long-term impacts, and that resilience is built through facing adversity with courage and clarity. Ultimately, the land became a living story, one that honored the past, celebrated the present, and inspired the future. Every harvest, every repaired fence, every visit from neighbors and friends was a reminder that justice, when pursued with dedication and patience, can restore not only property, but pride, dignity, and hope. The man who had left to serve his country had returned to reclaim more than land. He had reclaimed the essence of home, family, and the unbreakable human spirit. In the end, the journey transformed him. He was no longer simply someone who had been wronged. He was a testament to resilience, justice, and the enduring strength of patience and integrity. The struggles, the doubts, the emotional battles had all contributed to a victory that was not just legal, but deeply human. The land stood as a symbol of triumph, a living proof that perseverance, careful planning, and unwavering moral clarity can turn betrayal into a legendary comeback.